Hey guys, this is Justin from the It Will Not Die podcast. I'm doing a special recording here with Jason Hall, who's the organizer of the Fauxpocalypse event that I went to in Calgary, Alberta on April 6th, 7th?
Six, seven.
6th. So we're also joined on the recording by Kyle, who's the owner of Imaginary Wars, where we played the games,
Hello.
and by Scott, who was there playing as one of the Dirty Imperials.
Also, hello.
So I'm going to let Jason take it away and talk about what the event was and go from there.
Hi, everybody. Just to give you a bit of background about the Fauxpocalypse thing that we put on, we've got a beginner league night that we do at Imaginary Wars here in Calgary. And we focus on fun and community first. We wanted to apply that to a larger setting where we could kind of all play with our big toys. So we came up with the idea of this Fauxpocalypse, which is an apocalypse-esque type game. So we basically got to play with all our big toys, but we still kind of harped on the idea of fun and community. And that's kind of how it all started.
Excellent. And, you do talk about the kind of like an apocalypse game. And I think what you did was you selected the rules that were best for both systems to make sure that the gameplay stayed up nice, going quickly. What was kind of your design process, at least, with making sure that games went well? Because you didn't actually play anything on the day of the game, did you?
No, I pretty much acted as a game master that you would get, say, for D&D or any of the other gaming systems. I wanted to make sure that there was someone in place that they could really, affect the game. And if someone got slaughtered, Scott, for example, if you have a really rough go for whatever reason, you can actually come back in the game and play with your toys. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had a really decent time playing the game, and if things were a little off-kilter list-wise, then we could allocate reinforcements out. Other thing as well we can do that was really cool was setting a fixed time for each of the turns. This made sure that everybody got a chance to play, and that we actually finished the game of Apocalypse in a day, which was a lot of fun.
Definitely. And I know for myself that I've played in about a dozen different Apocalypse games now, and this is the first time I ever went to round 6 at the end of a game that didn't take 2 full days. So that was really cool. And it was nice that you were clear and open about what you required for, the list timeline, because that definitely affected my army list design to make sure that I wasn't taking 150 Space Marines, because I just wasn't going to have time to do that in 40 minutes a turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the nice thing is it adds a little bit of lights a bit of fire under everybody's butts to kind of keep moving and see what they can accomplish in that fixed amount of time. So lots of transports, lots of people kind of dropping their dudes in and just holding a specific section. And it was really neat to see. It added a whole bunch of extra intensity, and it seemed like it was a fun kind of intensity. So that's kind of what we were shooting for. The other games that I've played of Apocalypse pretty much lasted, 12, 13 hours, and yeah, you made it to turn 2 or 3. You put all your dudes on the table and you say, let's go for it. And it ends up just being a bunch of moving around, a bunch of shooting, you take some guys off, and then everyone packs up their goodies and goes home. So it was very important to me that we actually finish the game to move the narrative along.
And I think you did a good job of setting the tempo with that. You also did something really interesting that I liked, was that you forced everybody to submit a list, and nobody could actually officially register for the event until their list was approved by you. Scott, with that in mind, did that kind of affect your army choice?
I mean, it was certainly part of it. I'd attended enough of the beginners' nights going in that I kind of knew what the expectations were for everybody in regards to list construction that was supposed to be themed and narrative, as opposed to maximize the amount of damage you can do to the opposing side. But I definitely see where you're coming from. I think it was a very useful exercise to have guys know that somebody was going to take a look at their list, and that the atmosphere for the event was going to be engineered to be more narrative, casual, and fun, and less ultra-competitive. So I think in some ways it absolutely did. It definitely, gave me the headspace to go with something casual like my Deathwing, as opposed to bringing all the D-Weapon Eldar. So no, I think it was a good choice.
I think having the expectations proclaimed loudly and constantly really challenged a lot of guys. I think basically there's a lot of guys who came to the beginners nights that already kind of knew what the score was, but you could tell the other guys who'd never really come before, they were still showing up with, they're like, this is my chance to use my big tank army, and they still did it. And luckily we were able to pair them off, but I could tell as the day went that they were playing something they hadn't actually expected. Like, I think some guys were still in sort of don't want to say hard gear mode, but they're definitely treating it like it was still a tournament. And by the end of the day, they realized this was all about just playing the game all day long.
The nice thing about setting it up this way too is that the original plan was to have a smaller game, and that's what we did with the Fauxpocalypse. And then we'll talk about it a little later, but we're turning this into something bigger. We're looking at 40 to 60 players, and then something even bigger still. But this way, we get to seed the crowd in essence, and we can literally just say, hey, this is all about fun, and with the community setting that expectation, and that's exactly what happened with this on Facebook and in the store, and while we're just kind of talking to people. It was really neat to see how on board people were with this narrative take on the game, and this is the chance to come up with Super Commissar George and his retinue of 3 acolytes and all this other stuff. It was really, really neat to see the amount of effort that people are putting in to have this really fun, really themed set of lists. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I think one of the really cool things that helped me sell this, because once I saw what was going on and heard about this, I was like, okay, I'm on board. I know that you guys previously had done the Red Shirt event, which was kind of like boarding spaceships, and was very thematic and really cool and had some awesome rules surrounding it. As soon as I heard that you guys were doing another event, I was definitely on board. And then when I heard there was pre-list submissions, I called my younger brother, who's, other than one time that he went to a charity tournament that I ran, he's never really played outside of his own gaming group. And I was like, no, you got to come play this. This is going to be fun. It's going to be fluffy. And I think even just the pre-list submission kind of triggered in people's heads that I got to kind of tone it down. I got to do something fluffy because it might get kicked back to me. So that was really cool. Like, as I'm not part of the beginner nights yet, it's definitely something I want to start doing more often, which is on the Wednesday nights every other week at Imaginary Wars.
Yeah.
Sure.
It sort of follows a bi-weekly, like week on, week off kind of format where every second week we have a special mission and we have hard limitations put in place. But then on the off weeks, almost everyone still shows up anyways, and they'll play a little bit bigger games, but that camaraderie is still in the air, and it's still, everyone is gaming more for fun than anything else. So no one's showing up trying to fine-tune their tournament list or anything like that. A big game is usually 1,500 points, so that no one even goes really tournament level unless it's really agreed ahead of time and they know it's going to be a slower night.
That's awesome, because that's why I wanted to make sure we plug this in here too, is that's a really good culture for that style of gamers. I mean, if you're into a group that's all about tournament play and everything, that's awesome, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more narrative and fun, that's a really good place for people to go and have a safe place to play. I know for me that one of the cool things with the pre-list submission was that I was personally under the attitude of, okay, how can I help this event as best as possible? And so I ended up submitting 3 lists to Jason right off the bat. And Jason was kind enough to pick the list that I didn't have any models painted for, but that fit the narrative
find he's
the
good
best.
that way.
I thought so too.
I have high expectations. Come on.
I know. It was nothing like painting 15 tanks in 2 weeks. But it was really cool to see that, for me, that was the first time I'd ever seen that on a Facebook event that you could start having discussions with other people that were in the event. And it was cool for me because, I started posting a couple pictures here and there, and then other people started posting, and it was just kind of a build-up effect where it kept growing and growing and growing, and more people were getting excited to play. I know at the beginning the expectation was, you didn't have to have any painted models, but I think when I got there on the day, 85 to 90% of the models on all the tables were fully painted.
No, I was pretty impressed with how that enthusiasm really snowballed. It was really neat how when it was shown really from the get-go it wasn't a tournament, how guys were very willing to talk about what they were bringing. So there's a lot of bragging and one-upping each other on what kind of stuff, where the progress was, what they were bringing, and so on, rather than normal where guys don't want to show their hand too early because then it'll give guys tips on how to beat them should they be paired up.
Yeah, it was really neat seeing the community all coming together and just getting caught up in the story. And, some of the guys are starting to post fluff about, kind of background and history and story of what their guys are doing. And we were still seeing a little bit of that momentum today on the Facebook group, just seeing, lots of people really excited about the stuff that they're doing, getting excited about their toy soldiers, getting excited about, telling a story and seeing these big cinematic things to happen again. So I really had a lot of fun watching and seeing all the little bits of story kind of coming out beforehand, and then the stories that developed during the game It was almost like reading a novel in some respects. It was pretty cool.
Now, Scott, you've got a fairly nicely painted army. Did you do any painting in the last little stretch before the event, or that was all done already?
No, I actually did a fair bit in the last little while, mostly on the night. A number of the Terminators were done, but getting one 5-man squad, couple characters, my 4 assassins, and my Imperial Knight painted. That was all in preparation for the event. And it was motivated largely by what was being posted in that Facebook group. Painting thing wasn't mandatory. It was definitely a suggestion, but it wasn't mandatory. But watching everybody else paint their stuff up and thinking about how cool that table was going to look when everybody's painted stuff was all down there at once really motivated to get that stuff done. And to have a group of other gamers that were so receptive and on the same page with the event, throwing accolades around in the group when you posted something that was finished, really made it not a chore at all to get that stuff done. It wasn't the usual night before the tournament, 3 colors and sand flock rush 2 a.m. It was definitely a community building thing over a couple of weeks. So no, I put a fair bit of painting in, and I think in a much more positive frame of mind and on a much more reasonable timetable than at other tournament events I've attended.
Actually, I put that expectation out on the Facebook group. I said I've only got one rule initially right off, is that nobody paints the night before. I want everybody to get a good sleep, take it easy on watching that extra episode of whatever, or reading that extra chapter in your book. Get a good sleep, show up bright and early, no excuse for being late, and just come and have fun and be there, be present, and have fun with it. Because we've all done that. The pre-tournament painting your 3 squads of whatever infantry, and it's never the way you want it, and you're tired, and there's not a lot of benefit to it. But when we did it this way, hopefully, it seemed like everybody came and they had a blast, and the lead up was really good to see.
Yeah, I think it was really, really cool to see that. I did like your expectation of, I want to see your army bags packed on Thursday night.
Yeah, that's right.
I've spent way too many Friday nights, Saturday mornings still painting, so that definitely affected that. It was even really cool to see the event organizer putting out pictures of what they were working on. Jay, that was really cool to see. It was really inspiring to see the terrain that you were working on come together, as well as all of the armies. So
yeah, I felt a little left out. I had to start making some progress of my own. So that's all the community driving me. That's all.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to talking at least about the table itself. There were 4 6-foot by 4-foot tables set up in a U shape, where there was kind of like a 12-foot by 4-foot table in the middle, and then the other 2 were off on the end with just a little bit of overlap, so if you did need to move something on over to support your allies on a different table, you could. One of the things I really liked that you did, Jason, was that you had announced ahead of time how big our deployment zones were. So that gave me practice with setting up my army ahead of time to make sure that I had enough room on the table to get everything in how I wanted to, which definitely improved my deployment time, which is always a big challenge with Apocalypse from what I've seen. The other really cool thing I liked was that on the tables, everyone was across the table. If you think of like a Vanguard strike deployment, where your opponent would deploy in a Vanguard strike, that was your other ally on the same table. And that was really cool, because then that way there was always one ally and 2 opponents on the same table, and you could kind of pick which one you felt that you needed to go after, or you would have a better chance of attacking. So I think that made for a really good setup.
Yeah, I like the fact that everybody's got something to do, and their big toys have always got something to play with. And I think, honestly, it's just about making sure that everyone's got, everyone's busy. I think, you pay a fee, you paint these models, and then you show up for the day. I think it'd be just a shame to not be able to do much with them. So I think for me, it's all about staggering the deployment. So there's always, you're surrounded on all sides, and it's this big pockets of military forces fighting each other and kind of running in and out of the city, and you can actually support your allies. If everybody was on the same side and someone was on the other side, then it'd just be a big shooting gallery. But this way, it gave you the opportunity to move around and actually engage. So your close combat guys could close combat, and your shooty guys could shoot.
Definitely. Now, Kyle, I'm kind of curious. You guys do a lot of events or game nights, done tournaments at your store before. Was there a different reaction from customers coming in to seeing that event, how all of those people were playing on the same table? Or was it just something that kind of, oh yeah, it's those crazy wargamer people and we ignore them?
No, people were coming in. They're pretty excited about it. We're definitely a destination locations, so it's not like you just get random people coming in and going, wow, what the heck is this? But in the same breath, you get a bunch of people coming in who already kind of know something about the store, so they're not going to, the first reaction is not going to be, wow, is that ever weird? They're going to be a little bit more receptive, but only if it looks kind of cool. So when we have, on some nights, there's lots of guys with unpainted stuff. People come in and they're like, oh yeah, guys are just doing Warhammer, whatever. And on this day, guys were coming in and they're going, what is this? And, we kind of said, this is what's going on. And they're even more excited by the prospect of everyone kind of playing together as opposed to the sort of one-on-one thing, and realizing that everyone that was there was having a really good time. Like, there was a definite camaraderie in the air that was contagious. I mean, the people coming in just knew instantly that that was a really good time happening over in that corner of the store.
That's really interesting to see, because going through the pictures, because obviously putting together the website for the next event and all of that, just kind of flipping through all the pictures. I got everybody to submit their pictures in through Dropbox at the end of the event. And there's one thing that I noticed. Everybody is smiling in all of the pictures. So the entirety of the day, everyone's pretty much smiling. And there'd be the odd long shot, like, look at all the stuff going on. And you look at all the faces, and everyone's smiling and connected and having a good time. And as an organizer, well, that's a huge win.
Definitely. And even the pre-event camaraderie that was there. With the pre-list submission, there were 2 list sizes that people could put in. It was, you could bring a 2,000-point list with no super heavies, or a 3,000-point list with 1 super heavy. And I know I talked to Jason when we got to the end of it, and he said, oh yeah, well, we got 14 people with the 3 list, with the 3,000 points and a super heavy. So there were only 2 people that were signed up for the event who didn't have a super heavy. And I said, well, hey, if I can find somebody to lend these people super heavies, does that work? And I ended up lending out my Knight Lancer to the Ultramarine player, and then one of the Loyalist guys lent my brother the Angrath Demon, which was 888 points of Khorne Madness, which was really cool. My brother was super excited to see that, and I may come back to talking about him a lot, but for me it was always nice in the entire event to get him out of that same group that he's been playing with since junior high and be like, hey, look, there's other gamers that are cool and are happy and are excited about this. So he had a lot of fun with that. I think that even brings me into my first really funny thing that happened in the game. It was kind of a kick in the nuts for my brother, and that was, I think the first shot of the game was the Grey Knight player had the Aquila Strongpoint, and he launched a Vortex missile, and it directly hit Angrath. And then he rolled on the D chart, and he rolled a 6, and he ended up rolling 11 wounds. So, bam, 888 points of my brother's army is gone, plus whatever else was underneath that template. Just toast. And it was funny. That was kind of rough for my brother, but we'll talk more about how he got compensated for that later. But even at the end of the day, after we were all having drinks over at the pub that's just down the strip mall from the store, the guy who'd shot the Vortex missile posted on the Facebook group, and he's like, haha, and he painted on 2 Angron onto the side of one of the Vortex missiles, or Angrath, whichever.
Angrath with love, yeah.
Yeah. It was just kind of one of those really cool things to see people come together and do that, and that was a really fun thing. How about yourself, Scott? What were memorable moments from the game that triggered for you?
Well, I think there was a few. One of them was kind of like, I think if it had happened at a regular tournament, would have been a negative. I think anybody who was there knew how my first couple of turns went against Tau Army that was across the table with lots of AP 1 and 2 shooting against my Deathwing.
Your Terminator Army?
Yeah, that went predictably. But I think just the difference in the atmosphere made it actually pretty okay. Because I knew that the giant pile of grenades that I was jumping on were saving somebody localized on a nearby table from having to take all that shooting on the chin. So, it seemed, if I'd been in a tournament and I was just getting pantsed on the first and second turn, it would have been pretty frustrating because it would feel like a loss. But seeing, even though removing huge piles of models from the table isn't the best thing in a war game, knowing that I was at least jumping on that grenade and seeing other people getting work done because I was soaking up that firepower was, I think, something unique to the Apocalypse game. The second was the 100-yard Hail Mary pass of a shot that my Vindicare made, which I'm still proud of, through 3 buildings into the head of a Nurgle corrupted ex-Imperial Guard commissar. Just turned him into mist through 3 layers of hard cover after the other guard player popped his Chimera open. So I enjoyed that one. It was a bit of retribution after the first couple of turns, but it's the kind of cinematic moments you only really get in an Apocalypse game.
And I think that brings me to the thing that I found the coolest was just walking around the table. And because I'm one step removed, I can actually see all the stories that are going on. And they call me like, hey, Jay, this just happened, and this just happened, and this just happened. And hey, Jay. And then I get called over somewhere else. And there's all these little stories, these little Alamos, of defense, and these Omaha beaches assaults, and just all these little stories that kind of materialize through the day. That was one of my favorite things to see. The other favorite thing to see from kind of a helicopter view looking down is the moment where Scott said, hey, look, guys, I'm in a lot of trouble. And Scott started to coordinate with people all the way across the table. There was a guard tank player all the way across the table. And he started raining in Death Strike missiles and the Basilisk barrages from 2-3 tables away. It was really neat to see that everyone started to clue in that you're all playing as part of a team. And Scott had suggested earlier that maybe we incorporate that into part of the game to have someone allocating resources around and all that. So food for thought in the future for sure. But seeing everybody realizing that they're working on a huge team of 8 people was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that's one of my memorable moments was Jody's my friend. We were both lined up with both had tank armies and being lined up across each other, and then him starting to use the Basilisk and, being like, okay, let's measure out the range. Oh, it's got a 20-foot range. It was pretty cool to be able to see that he could hit anything on the table. And you really see how something like a Basilisk comes into its own on a game like that.
Well, it's so funny because the Basilisk has been this mobile artillery piece. It's always had that stupid range. And everyone's been like, what's the point? You know what I mean? And every once in a while you get to see it. So it's always awesome when it gets to give a good account for itself.
Absolutely.
Where there's this one game where you've got an 18-foot long table and suddenly that guy matters. Whereas in the 4x6 or 4x4 tables, you're just like, oh, everything's in range. Okay, whatever. Basilisk's got crappy front armor and a gun that can shoot farther than it needs to. But in this game, you got to see it actually really matter.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I already bought 3 for the next game.
That's excellent. Actually,
yeah. I admit I felt the same way about my Vindicare, because it's just usually the same thing with the Vindicare Assassin. Like, he doesn't have the range of a Basilisk, but that rifle is going to cover the whole table. And it was really cool a couple of shots later in the game after wiping out Nurgle Guy, where you get to measure and you put the tape out to the 6 feet range that it's got and measure diagonally over somebody's head to an adjacent table and put a hole through a sergeant or something. That kind of a range thing was really cool. I 100% agree with that.
Everyone starts looking at their codexes and figuring out that those hunter-killer missiles have infinite range.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
wait a minute.
I got 8 tanks, 8 rhinos with hunter-killers on them, and we're going to start plowing into that thing way over there. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good thought for the next one.
Yeah.
But even that 72-inch range on my battle cannons and being on the corner of the U, I was able to have range to a lot of stuff. And there'd be a point where the other guys on my team would be like, hey, can we get some fire support over here? Because these Grey Knights are getting awfully close to us. And being able to put some fun shots on over to other tables was really cool and kind of added to that. And again, added to that camaraderie of the event of being on the same team. Not necessarily being on a tournament table and being like, no, I have to take this objective. And if I don't take this objective, it doesn't matter.
I'm really enjoying hearing this kind of conversation coming about, and for the next one with even more people. I half expect it to be a little bit of the New York Stock Exchange, people screaming back and forth at each other looking for support, because you're always going to be under the gun of that ticking clock, right? So even getting that little amount of support sorted out would be awesome to see all the people trying to organize this stuff in a very short period of time. I imagine it'll be quite exciting.
Yeah, or even taking pictures off of other tables and then printing them off from a printer and going and giving them to somebody who's got the artillery and being like, yeah, what do you want to shoot at on this table over here? That building might be full of grots or it might be full of space marines. Who knows? Now, I've talked a little bit before about how you did a great job of organizing all of this, but I do want to touch on that a little bit more. For people who are even thinking of trying to do another event like that or thinking of coming to the next one, I think a lot of that attitude and that camaraderie and extending that culture to the people who weren't normally from the beginner nights came from you, Jason. You know, you were very clear with the players pack and with the time schedule of what was expected. You know, and that really helped set that tempo and get people going. And I mentioned before that you helped out my brother with Angrath. You know, kind of what was your perspective from a GM, and what was, you know, at least from an unbiased perspective, you were able to make sure that everybody was playing equally. I think I want to say, you know, we're not looking for tournament balance, but we're looking for everyone having an equal amount of fun. What were the kind of things that you wanted to make sure that you did as part of that, or that helped you to be able to make sure that people were having fun?
Well, one of the things that I did, obviously, was we set the expectations right off the hop, and we talked about that earlier, of we're going to be here, we're going to have fun and all that. We also reduced the amount of shenanigans by looking at the lists beforehand, which, again, we also talked about before. One of the things that I also did as well was limit the super heavies. Now, I think we're going to change that a little bit in the next one for sure. But limiting the super heavies was nice because nobody really got to run away with anything else. Setting up the opponents appropriately across from each other, except for in the case of Scott and the Tau gentleman.
Sorry, I'm over.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I think the idea was to kind of match up like armies, like mentalities. So if someone did manage to bring a harder list just by virtue of, you know, playing an apocalypse list with lots and lots of their toys, then I could put them up against someone else with a harder list. But I actually, to be honest, I took a page out of Kyle's book from the events that he run at the store that he used to work at. And whenever I played in some of these events, and this is how Kyle and I met originally, Kyle was very good about saying, aha, this is what people are used to doing. Let's shift it up a little bit. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's put them into a different scenario than they're used to. So have a bunch of close assaulters across from Tau, and Tau have to kind of move their butts a little bit. If there's a big shooting army, put them in the middle of a lot of intervening terrain. If there's a huge, heavy, close assault army, well, then you want to make sure that, you know, they're balanced off in some way against another close assault army, which is great because they're both in their element and it evens things out. But mostly, honestly, the game, as much as 40K gets a pounding for being unbalanced, the games all balance themselves out spectacularly. And I put a lot of faith in the game, and I put a lot of faith in the players themselves. And I think that was the secret, just trusting that the game will work out and trusting that the players will work out. Now, there was a few times where some people got massacred on one table and someone got got their butts kicked on another table. So I went around, you know, at that first round of reinforcements after turn 2 and made sure that everyone had some extra toys to play with. So yeah, count up 1,000 points of reinforcements, or hey, why don't you grab some guys and deep strike some reserves over there, or you grab 500 points of guys. And after going around the table, I kind of kept track of everything on a notepad and I write everything down. And it actually turned out being perfectly balanced in terms of the points that they got back. The good guys, in air quotes, good radio, the good guys would get 2,000-3,000 points spread out amongst the players, and the bad guys, air quotes, would get another 3,000 points. And it just magically worked out through pretty much the entirety of the day. And up to the turn, say 3 and 4, the game was pretty much tied, and it was amazing to see that the balance actually worked. But you just got to have faith that the game is going to be good. But a lot of that kind of came from pre-screening the lists too, I'm sure. But
yeah, I know one of the really cool things that came up was my brother being able to bring Engrath back on the table, but then you told him, you got to keep that spawn over there alive. That's your mission. As long as that's alive, you can keep Engrath. And he told me that was really cool for him because it kind of kept him focused rather than, I just got this extra 1,000 points in my army, and here we go. And I know that for him at least helped him adjust. Scott, when you got your reinforcements, you didn't even redeploy back onto the table you started on, did you?
Nope. No, I did a little tactical reassessment. Figured I had been done my time against the Tau and held that down as long as was going to be feasible. And a buddy of mine who I'd driven down with and had breakfast with, who was having a bit of a rough time on the other table, Jason said, throw I think it was like 500 or 600 points back on the board, maybe a little more than that. But what I ended up getting back, no, it was 1,000. I got back my knight, my Vindicare assassin, and then 2/3 of a command squad. Just all my favorite stuff, my prettiest paint jobs, and just dumped it on my buddy's table.
Yeah, so you came over and punched me in the nuts. Thanks.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was valid strategy.
Clearly, Justin, you needed a nut punching. Let's be honest.
There was a lot of tanks still over there, if we're being real.
So it
was really fun. I think it was handled really well. Also, just as an aside, I think it's interesting that you had a couple of people who are definitely veterans of the game. Don't get me wrong, but at a glance could balance a game without the need for points. Without the need for, well, if I give one side 1,000 points, the other side must immediately have 1,000 points. It kind of worked out that way in the end, but I thought it was kind of cool that as a community of gamers, we were not only capable of playing a game without points and keeping it balanced, but that the game seemed to be more fun because of it. I think that really worked out.
I think we've all had those. We've all had those games where we've just completely rolled the other opponent, and it was no fun. For them or for us. And when they're rolling us, depending on the personality type, maybe they're having a blast, but really it's most often no one's having fun in those situations.
No, exactly.
And if you get a few lucky rolls and there's some big toys rolling around on the table, and if you get a few lucky rolls or it's a tight deployment or what have you, you know what? You could lose 2/3, 3/4 of your army in a few minutes on the table.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's just not fun. And it's not going to be fun for the other person because they're going to have shot their big stuff, and then it'll be over because they won't have anything else to do for the rest of the day. So adding more stuff on gives them more stuff to shoot at and gives you another chance, another breath of life, and hopefully it just enables everyone to have fun for the whole day.
Yep.
Well, it also kind of pulls in the idea that this is part of a larger ongoing conflict, and there's some strategic reserves being pulled back into the game. Kind of broadens the horizon of what that game is. But no, I think it did a good job of helping people have fun. I think a really good sign was that, with Apocalypse, you schedule your breaks, and then you tally up your objective points at those breaks. And at the first break, we were tied at an even 12 points per side. In the second break, Chaos was kind of taken away, but it wasn't a whole lot of points. And I think that's a good sign of the balance that was still there, even with bringing in the reinforcements, that things were still close, even though in the first 2 turns, the Imperials on that one Tau table just got annihilated.
Yeah, there was a few rolls that you couldn't really come back from, but it's this massive, massive team game. It was just really neat to see how it ended up working out. And Scott's redeployment, I thought, was awesome, and shooting across the board, awesome.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the next event, Wargasm, that's coming up November 4th and 5th, right?
Absolutely. So Wargasm is going to be essentially the next step in the evolution of this process, and it's a midway point. We hope to get up some pretty impressive numbers, and hopefully, do some hotel room booking, which would be great. But for the short term, what we're doing is we're going to be scheduling, depending on ticket sales, between 40 to 60 people for Age of Sigmar. We're calling it the Grand Campaign. And for the Saturday, we're going to be doing another round of Fauxpocalypse, a very similar type of format. And the idea behind this is that the Sigmar, just the way that Sigmar kind of plays out as it stands right now, we're going to be doing a massive team event, very similar to the sorties, the red shirt events, and some of the other events that we've done where you're fighting on one table, but you actually are affecting, you've got a teammate on the table, but you're actually affecting things on other tables as well. So we've got great feedback from those. We're going to be adopting that formula for the Age of Sigmar night, which is going to be fantastic. And then for the next day, we're going to be starting early and doing the Fauxpocalypse thing, very similar to what we did before, but again, 40 to 60 people now, so much, much larger groups of people. And again, very much focusing on the fun, the community of it. And afterwards, we're going to be calling it the Nerd Olympics, I think is the tentative name for this thing so far. But we're going to have a whole bunch of different things and events and maybe a small painting competition or what have you. But we're going to book aside a corner of the restaurant that's just down the road there. Go over there and have a few drinks and hand out some prizes for some really goofy acts of nerdery, which should be a ton of fun. And that's going to be the weekend. Hopefully the next one after we'll be able to have Sigmar and 40K again, and maybe even incorporate some other gaming systems. So this is an event that we're slowly building up speed to, but we don't want to over budget it. We want to keep the focus on community and just have a pile of fun.
And I know you've already started working with some of the community members internationally and some of the products that they release as prize support too, which is really cool. And I think that kind of brings me to a point that I want to make about, and that I want to say thank you to you, Kyle. The two things that you kind of did for everybody on the day was that you bought pizza lunch for everybody, which was
awesome. Really cool.
So thank you for that. And the other thing was giving everybody $10 gift certificate to the store at the end. And it was really cool for that, for at least for me, because it was like rewarding the entire group for having a good time rather than just, oh yeah, he's the best painter that's here, and that guy got beat the most, so he's the best sportsman, and you're the most hardcore guy who brought the best net list, so here you go, you get the grand prize for best general. So thank you very much for doing all of that stuff, Kyle.
Absolutely. I've just always had a kind of a bone to pick with a lot of basic stuff, how the tenets of the sacrosanct structure of tournaments, where what it is we all put money into this pot, and depending on the size of the show, 2 to 6 guys get everyone else's money. I'm just always like that. That always has rubbed me the wrong way. I don't mind giving recognition where it's due. I don't mind prizes for the top guys, but I've always felt that everyone should leave getting something out of it. So that way everyone gets to call it, everyone's a winner, everyone gets a participation prize, but really we're all contributing to each other's fun. So I'm always just kind of like, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth that in the bigger events, like 30, 40 guys, are basically subsidizing 3 guys to walk home with lots of stuff. And I guess some guys don't mind it because they're living they're reaching for that rainbow of, well, I could be the best general, which means I'll be the guy that walks out with $300. But that's 3 out of 30 guys at best, right? I've always made that sort of my hallmark, is that I want to make it so everyone comes in and they get some sort of reward for playing, just because we all feel better if we don't feel like we just wasted a day losing all day.
And it also,
or maybe that's just me who loses all day.
It also takes an amazing amount of pressure off the group on the whole. It's because if we were very clear about this right from the outset, Kyle and I were crazy clear about it, that there is going to be no prizes for winning. There are prizes for being part of a strong community, for having fun together, and this was huge. It takes the pressure off of, do I take these guys or do I take these guys? Well, if I take these guys, I'll have a shot at the prize. Or if I take these guys, I'll be quite entertained, and so will my opponent. That's fantastic.
Well, and I mean, here I thought it was just like an evil plot from Kyle, because nothing in his store is less than $11.
So it's funny how that works out.
That's weird.
I think for me, I'm very excited about the November event. I'm hoping that I have the opportunity to attend it. I'm hoping that I talk to my wife well in advance to make sure that she knows what's going on with that. But I'm very excited to see that opportunity, because I will say for myself, I've been in this hobby for 13, 14 years, and without a doubt, and this is recording almost 2 months later, that was without a doubt the best game of Warhammer 40K I've ever played. To me, that's a really good marker of how much fun it was, how much fun everybody had, and what the community liked and the culture was like there, and also a good idea of what the next one's going to be like.
Well, I'm glad. That's really good feedback to hear, and we're hoping you can make it. We've got this group of people that understand our obsession with little toy soldiers. We might as well hang out and make it a good time nonetheless. Really glad you had a good time, and hopefully we can live up to those expectations for the next one.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit more about the next one. Just in a thought, you did mention some things, but I know there's details. What's the point limits going to be like for AOS and for the Fauxpocalypse?
So for AOS, it's going to depend on the system that we choose, but for now, we've been using the pool system as a comping system, and of course, in the time between now and then, GW is slated to release their comp system, so that might have something to do with it. They're also talking about a system for fighting large-scale battles, so that will be a part of it as well. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to look for around 40-ish pool points. Don't quote me on that. That's still a number I need to work out. And we're going to have basically tiered deployment stuff coming in as we go. And for the Fauxpocalypse thing, we're looking at 4,000 points, 1,500 of which can be super heavies. but all the details will be coming soon. And again, that'll be a tiered deployment as well. We had some great feedback actually with Scott that suggested it, that we tier in or migrate in the Titans. So, say turn 2, the Titans will be able to shoot onto the table as they're approaching. And on turn 3, they'll hit the table at the beginning of your movement phase. The net result of this, of course, is that everybody gets to play with their super heavy. They're not going to have their big Angrath monster shot out from under them on the turn 1. So hopefully that increases the fun factor for everybody, and everybody gets to use their toys. And again, that's what the game's all about. For the evening of this Saturday, we've got the Park, which is a fantastic restaurant across the way that's booked up. And we'll be having our Nerd Olympics or our wind-down ceremonies or what have you. That'll be there. That will be open to both the Age of Sigmar players and the 40K players as well. And hopefully that we've got a bit of the people showing up for the whole weekend. That's the tentative plan right now. Obviously, things are coming together pretty quickly. Kyle obviously has dedicated some support to the event, which is wonderful, and we want to support him first because Kyle is an amazing force in the community. We're also looking at doing the swagger pack. So we're looking at doing custom templates for the Wargasm event. We're looking at doing the campaign ribbons. So we want to make this a regular thing. So we want to bring in a kind of a collectible element to it. So you can have a campaign ribbon for every event that you've been to, and a little board to go on your. So you look like the generals walking around with the hardware store on your chest. It'd be kind of fun. We want to incorporate those into the packs as well. T-shirts, all kinds of stuff. This is all stuff that is rapidly forming. We've got just around 5 months now, which isn't a whole lot of time, but that's the plan so far.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like an absolute blast. Scott, any final thoughts on things that we did or things you're excited for with the next event?
I think we've covered most of it. I'm definitely looking forward to the next event. I definitely plan to take in both sides of it, both the 40K event and the Age of Sigmar event. I think Age of Sigmar is rapidly becoming one of my favorite miniatures games, which I was not expecting when I initially got into it. I chose to be cautiously optimistic about a game that gets a lot of heat online, but it turned out that optimism was well placed. Played in a doubles event, again at Imaginary Wars, I guess it's a couple of months ago now. I had an absolute ride of a time. I think the double system works very well for the game. I think the very sort of rudimentary community balance system panned out really well. And I'm very, very, very much looking forward to the event at the next large-scale event that Jason's putting together. I think it's going to be a really good time. So I'm going to get my second and third night painted up and get my Sigmar Cav done up, and it'll be a good time.
Awesome. And Kyle is thinking about having a booth there, I think. I'd love to have Kyle there if he's available to make that happen.
I missed all of that because Skype is sort of crapping out on me.
Oh no! No.
We were talking about how at the next event you're going to have a sales booth, and that if anybody goes over and buys anything, if they can get it assembled, they can put it on the table.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. I mean, they'd have to pay a premium price for that kind of benefit, obviously.
That's
but,
right.
That's right.
Pretty sure Games Workshop already comes at a premium price.
Well, I think Kyle's referring to the beer and snacks after. I think is what Kyle's talking about. So
I was more envisioning a better than premium price, but
spoken like a true store owner.
Well, one of the things we wanted to do, and we just kind of keep meaning to it and never gets started, is we want to come up with and Jay was going to turn me on to this idea that like Imaginary Wars dice, where you come to events and you get one of these dice, and it'll have, instead of a number 1, it'll be the Imaginary Wars logo, and if ever the IW comes up, because you're playing at one of the events, you get to re-roll that die, basically like Master Crafted, where you get to re-roll your ones. But as you go to each and every event, you get more. You get basically 1 dice for every event, but you can never re-roll more than one of those at a time. So even though you've got a bucket of 7 of them that you're rolling, if 5 ones come up, well, you only get to re-roll 1 of them. It'll be one of those things where it just sort of rewards guys for continuously contributing to the community.
Yeah, it's an idea I've been really stoked about for a long time, and Kyle and I have been trying to make this work.
Oh, we got so close, and Chessex was sold out of everything, and then. I kid you not, I was talking to the guy, and he's like, well, call us back in 2 months. And that was, 4 months ago kind of thing. But
all right, so next, we're up on this one. This is our next task on the list.
Yeah, well, now that I've said it, we got to do it, right?
Exactly, absolutely.
That or one of the other cool things I'd heard was they were giving out dog tags. They were getting dog tags printed. And then each of the dog tags had a special rule on it. If you had the dog tag, then you had the special rule for the next event you went to. Those are all really cool things. If anybody's listened to the podcast, as I said before at the beginning, that I'm with the It Will Not Die podcast, we've talked at length about how much I enjoy shopping at Imaginary Wars just because of how much Kyle supports the community and what a good job he does with that. So it's very exciting to see the opportunities for us to support Kyle back for all the stuff that he's done, and also see what's coming up in the future.
Well, guys, thanks a lot for taking the time to put this all together. I know we tried to record this once before, so if it sounds a little rehearsed, that's that's not no accident.
It's not rehearsed, it's just professional.
It's professional, yeah. We made sure it happened. But I'm really glad that we could spend the time to do this. This is fantastic. So, looking forward to hosting the next one, and thanks again, guys, for all your time.
Anytime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Center over. What did you do?
Nope, that's over there.
Thank you, Scatter. That's why you don't use any scatters. He reduces it by half, but it takes away his invulnerable saves.
1 and 2 would be perfect.
I've never seen an enemy. Wow, that guy can go way back farther than I thought he could. Holy shit!
Yep, 3 and the others are 2.
Well, actually, D3 wounds. Because you're a gargantuan creature.